and thank you all for being here today. As you may have heard, as Lee just mentioned, I'm launching a new magazine called Design LA. And as I pulled the issue together, one of the things that struck me about our community was its diversity. One cannot create a true reflection of the design world today that's not culturally diverse. And in Los Angeles particularly, it's that diversity that makes our design community so vibrant and surprising. There's never been a more important time to celebrate the role of immigration in the design world and to hear the voices of those who have crossed our borders to join our creative economy, to enrich our culture, and to help us become the kind of society we aspire to be. And we're lucky today to have a great panel with us to explore all of this. Jonathan was born in Sumatra and developed an appreciation for Indonesia's natural beauty and traditions of craftsmanship. Educated in Switzerland, he traveled across Europe, visiting some of the best antiques markets in the world and developing a keen eye for collections. Jonathan opened his first antiques and floral design shop in San Francisco. That shop became a favorite resource for design enthusiasts, and he began giving patrons advice on interior design, which led him to start his own design firm. His knowledge of other countries, their markets, and their languages allows him to lead clients to the best each place has to offer. Colette moved from Toronto to London in the year 2000. After obtaining an interior design degree and a master's degree in decorative arts at London's Wallace Collection, she spent 13 years in the UK as creative director for the legendary design talent Nikki Haslam. Colette now divides her time between Toronto and Malibu, and she's completed projects in London, Toronto, New York, Miami, Montreal, Morocco, New Orleans, Denmark, Barbados, Monaco, and Moscow, among other places. Alberto Villalobos is from Colombia, South America, and his partner, Mercedes Decio, is Italian. They studied at the New York School of Interior Design, and after obtaining their degrees, they opened Villalobos Decio Design and the antiques boutique Ethos in New York City. Villalobos is known for successfully mixing new pieces, antiques, and contemporary art, and their aesthetic is inspired by a wide range of cultural influences, from French, African, and pre-Columbian to Asian and American. Villalobos Decio Design has been commissioned to design homes in the US and Europe for a discerning international clientele. So please welcome our panelists today. Give them a hand. I want to start, Jonathan, tell us about where you grew up. Tell us about Sumatra.
Indonesia is a very volatile country, and when I was growing up, that was in the early 70s, we had some of you might know, a dictator / fascist, Suharto. In many ways, my family, specifically my family, is a minority within the country. We are a mix of Chinese, Dutch, Indonesian, of a Christian backgrounds, and that itself is a target. I remember growing up and not being able to go to school, or my parents had to rush to take me out of school because of various riots, and they target certain group of people. And that's my memory, earliest memory. As a child, that's what I remember about that was made fun of, or people started calling names. And being I think some of us can relate, being homosexual. As a child, you know you're different. As young as 6 or 7, I couldn't wait to get out of Indonesia. I felt like I was a fish out of water. And the first time I heard the song, if you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear flowers in your head. And that song and the city San Francisco in the US, that was the first time. And Little House in the Prairie. And my impression was just the land of the free. Truly, just you can do whatever you want, meaning to reach your dream or your goal versus being oppressed and repressed.
How do you think your background informs your work?
I have half of my clientele are most probably either they live in Asia or my project is there, or in Europe, and half are in the country. I think because they could relate, or they don't feel intimidated. I think that's part of it, because they can relate, or I can relate to them better than some people who have not lived out of their own home country.
In another sense, immigrant workers make up a large portion of the design labor force. Could you talk a bit about that in your experience?
I grew up in a country where almost everybody's craftsmen. And when I came here, it's interesting that we are a lot more in touch with the immigrant labor force, as almost every workroom I went to, or like somebody who gild a mirror or repair antiques, they're always from somewhere else, especially in the Bay Area. I mean, that's my source. So just like with any business in this country, I think not just design business, I think we rely so much of the labor from different parts of the world, immigrants.
I think 90% of our immigrants all throughout, and I find it refreshing. It's like, when you're not speaking with them in Italian, you're speaking in Spanish, you're speaking in English. It's fascinating. I don't know if it happens in the other cities, but in New York, it is what it is. And I guess we are all immigrants, and it's
definitely
kind of
the case here in Los Angeles too. And Alberto, tell us about Colombia when you were growing up there.
I think at all times in Latin America, you live in two realities. So yes, I grew up in a country that it was going like a war with drug dealers and the guerrillas, but at the same time, like in the part where most of the population live, thank God we were blessed and we were safe, and it was just wonderful. It's always warm weather, you're always in the country, horseback riding, like it's just plantations, it's beautiful. For me, I'm from a small city. I wasn't from the capital, so the plan was always is when you graduate high school, you either move to the States or England or Canada to do an exchange year and learn English, which I did. I lived a year in the States. I moved here. I was in Ohio for a year, and after living there a year, I decided to go back home, and I went to university in Bogota for business, and I hated it, so I changed to design school. And when I changed to design school, I realized what I needed to get and what I desired to get, I was not going to be able to achieve it in Colombia. So that's when I decided to move to New York to go to design school and to be able to kind of like keep learning and keep growing.
And when you arrived here, was it what you expected, or in what ways was it different?
At the beginning, I think it was a bunch of mixed emotions for me. Like I was validating my school, all my diplomas. When I got to the school, they couldn't validate anything. I needed to start from scratch. So it was like all these like mixed emotions. But like after a week, when I put my life in order, it's finally feel like you have somewhere where you completely fit. Especially like in what I wanted to do with design, and when you're back, when you just, your garden is Central Park and you have the Met and you have everything, and it's just like everything is on your fingerprints, and then you start meeting the community. I think what is one of the most amazing things is like for me, the design community has been extremely generous. And they completely, like I always felt welcome, and we just support each other, and so it's been an amazing experience.
Alberto, how did you find your way into? Was it always something that, and was Colombia, was it a value there?
I didn't know that it existed, interior design also, because growing up, for a man, especially where I come from, you could study whatever you want as long as it's law, medicine, or engineering. So,
I mean, is leaving one's comfort zone, and home, of course, is the most profound comfort zone we all have. Is that beneficial for everyone in some sense? I mean, in a way, when you're working.
To me, the best thing that happened, which was the worst at the same time, and I recommend it to everyone, is you should do an exchange year. It's like every kid after they graduate from high school, go to a country where you don't understand the language, when you need to learn the language, when you don't know the culture. And it's just like, you're trying to manage an airport by yourself. You're doing all these things. There's nothing that will make you grow more than adversity.
There's nothing you can study or hear that can replace the experiential. Like when I was young, just graduated. I wasn't a big Corbusier fan, for example, you know, and I made a 2-week pilgrimage because I like to kind of keep it complex. So I decided I don't really like Corbusier, so I think I should go and study him for 2 weeks. And then having had that experiential relationship with his buildings, well then obviously, you know, my relationship was completely different and I was awed and it changed everything. So yeah, I agree. Sometimes you just have to throw it to the wind and get out there for a little bit.
And just generally, what are the things, I think the design world is amazingly inclusive, amazingly inspiring. Your stories, hearing your voices, hearing the voices of everybody working in the design community is very inspiring. Are there other things we can do to help push back against the current atmosphere of fear, I think is what you mentioned, Alberto, of fear of the other, fear of outside influences that somehow has gained currency in our country in a way that it hasn't before?
I think we need to talk about all the topics. We don't talk about race, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about religion, we don't talk about so many things. So then you don't know how to react. You don't know what's happening because people trying to be, I think we became too politically correct. That's my point of view. And because of that, people are afraid to say the wrong thing, so they don't even end up learning what is happening. Mm-hmm. And then there you get what you're getting right now.
No, silence is the worst.
Silence is not golden.
And Colette, you grew up in Toronto, which is now, I was reading, one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world. Did it strike you that way at the time?
No, I was blissfully unaware. And I think now I increasingly become aware of how privileged I was to be in a place that I could be that naive.
How did you decide to leave Canada for England?
Well, funny enough, I think there's probably a lot of romantics in our industry. I had the sort of Walt Disney, you know, experience of growing up looking at sort of all those European sets, and that set up a sort of longing for me. So I emigrated from somewhere that was, you know, completely safe and easy and well known to I was looking for sort of trouble and adventure and architectural wonder, and so that was my journey.
Canadians can usually pass as Americans, if you will, but are there fundamental differences in outlook or worldview? Or do people assume
well, you know,
you're American
I was thinking
too?
about that, and what I always think about is there's so many different Americas.
That's
in my
an excellent point.
In my perspective, and in some ways there's different Canadas as well. So when I was in the UK, people would always think I was American, and then they would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I'd say, "For what?"
As your international experience, how does that inform your work, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think all designers travel a lot. At least the ones, I think you can see it in their work. The ones that do, but there's nothing like really immersing yourself in a culture. Like you can go to, you know, England or Paris and go to the showrooms and the nice hotels and the nice restaurants, but you know, when you live there, you absorb the light and you absorb all the nuances, like that, they just become sort of part of the fabric of your visual vocabulary. So there's so many ways of answering that question, and I think it's enormous, is really what I'm trying to say.